that you're comfortable taking, it can be a real problem.
Well, we have the game ready to go, so Dan and Bryce, take it away.
All right, thank you very much, Necro. As we go into game number 1 of day 2 here at the Teamfight Tactics Fates Regional Finals, we're heading on board with Valet, the point leader from yesterday, who seemed to be playing very narrow, as you were describing in the pre-show, by focusing mainly on Slayers and deviations thereof. However, with Slayers, you usually want to be starting with a little bit more of those attack damage focused components. You're talking about swords, BF swords, talking about recurve bows. You're even talking about sparring gloves. A tier's a little bit less in that tree, but still can totally make a hand of justice. But now that he's been given things like this cloak and this tier, I am interested to see if there's anything that's going to change going to day 2. And I first want to ask this to you, Bryce. You've sat in the seat a lot. You've had moments where you have that successful streak. Do you just continue to lean into that, or do you feel like Valet might be adapting a different strategy moving forward?
Yeah, if I were him, I would go with the horse that brung me, right? He had a dominant performance yesterday, so much consistency, and it was clear that he was so comfortable in the different iterations of the Slayer tree. I'm glad we actually get to start off with this situation, because we're going to find out whether or not he's sticking true to that, right? Unless this is a bow, the only real confident item that most players would slam in the situation is a chalice, which is an item that I think most players in this field would slam in this position and would lean towards, one of the more AP-based builds as a result of that. Chalice does not provide a lot of value in the Slayer tree specifically. Oftentimes that cloak wants to become a Runin's Hurricane, maybe a Declaw in a lot of lobbies. Like you said, the tier becomes a Hand of Justice. So we'll be interested to go back and see if he slams it, but I do not expect him to. I expect him to kind of stick with the strategy he had. As we pop over to Solus's board, Solus, a player who was very narrow on ladder coming in, playing a lot of Katarina. We didn't see that yesterday, Dan. We saw some Slayer, some KO. We saw him really playing, we saw him play reroll a couple times. We saw him really play flexibly. Did that surprise you?
It doesn't, because I think that, wow, hold the phone, finds a chosen Tristana as well as a Tristana 2 option, and he already has the glove and the cloak to make a Quicksilver, which is, pretty much the only item that I think most people agree is mandatory on Tristana to avoid any kind of CC control in the very beginning of the game. Wow, he's just going to go ahead and sell and opt out of rerolling. A lot of players have been going for Tristana reroll as part of their core strategy if they get the opportunity to do so. Even Aegon yesterday seemed like he was leaning towards that heavily. Is going to get a free win versus Ramblin', who has opted to go for the full open fort, not a single champion on the board. A lot of topics for us to break down here. The first thing, though, let's talk a little bit about Solus' choice to not reroll Tristana. Do you like that here, Bryce?
I do. I think if he had not pre-leveled going into 2-1, Dan, so he'd not, already committed to level 4, already spent the gold kind of pushing levels, we would have seen him pick this up and absolutely force the Tristana. I mean, 6 Tristanas on 2-1 is a pretty insane start for reroll, right? But when you've already put money into leveling, it makes everything worse. You're less likely to find 1-cost units. You're going to hit interest breakpoints slower, which are really pivotal. He gets another Tristana in his shop, Dan. That is brutal. But you know what? This is it's an okay start for him, right? He's got the sharpshooters online, the early spirit with the Yumi. He doesn't really have a front line, Dan. I mean, this Aurelia with no synergies is going to die very quickly, and then we'll see if he's able to actually kind of out DPS his board. I think if he faces a legitimately strong board, he's probably losing his streak here.
Yeah, very much so. And I totally get it, right? You've invested that gold. It feels re-rolling when you've already leveled and you're going to be fighting against your own odds feels pretty bad. That being said, there is a, secondary benefit of playing this, which is it makes other people who want to play Tristana make their lives a little bit more difficult. If he's holding, chosen Tristana, and if he ended up picking up another pair, for example, that makes other people who are in the lobby that might want to lean towards that as their core strategy have a harder time. But Aegon isn't here. It seemed like he was the only player that kind of identified the ability to go for that. So we'll see how everything else shapes up as we're approaching the first halftime of this stage. But yeah, I definitely agree with what you were saying there as we switch over to Kurum's point of view and catch up with him. Now let's talk a little bit about Kurum and his journey here. He is the last player to qualify via ladder points, And it was a little bit of a stressful weekend for him.
Yeah.
And I think going into the set, a lot of the fans had high expectations for Kerm because he's quite popular with the fan base. If you watch his stream, they're always rapping, always wanting to talk to him and hang out because he's such a cool guy. So, I think it was kind of a surprise that he just narrowly got in, but he made the best of his opportunity on day number 1.
Yeah, played really, really cleanly on day number 1. Very consistent performances from him. All but one of his games wound up being top 4s. And I'm not surprised to see that. Kerm is a player who's been around for a long time, certainly plenty of tournament experience. And, as we say, it's not about how you perform for the entirety of the set. It's really just about how you perform at the end of it, right? Worlds is going to be played on this patch. I think the patch suits him, right? He's a player with so much experience. He's very comfortable in a more flexible, kind of diverse meta, which is absolutely what we have going on here. He is going to lose a really close fight, and that one does hurt. Dan, he already leveled to 5 to play the Fortune streak. It matters a little bit less, right? It's not like he was big time streaking coming into this. He had already lost his opening fight, so just kind of building up the Fortune loss streak, if you will.
Yeah, and you can see that he was willing to even slam items to prioritize getting higher amount of tempo onto the board, seeing how he's prioritizing blue buff onto his Darius. I am curious to see what he's going to pick up here, given that he does seem a little bit open-ended with where he could go. He has a chosen Tristana, which apparently is the hotness right now. Everyone is getting chosen Tristana in this lobby, apparently. And also just kind of playing that Dragon Soul synergy, which has proven to be very reliable early game. So the nice thing about these Fortune early game strategies, as we saw in the Europe regional finals, is that it just gives you so much explosion that it's difficult for the lobby to keep up, and you can just jump, ahead of everybody in terms of power level and really ride that wave. And because of the way damage really racks up, as long as you're somewhat competitive onto the board, losing early with Fortune is not really that big of a detriment. It's compared to when you're trying to cash out later on stages 3 and, heaven forbid, stage 4 trying to cash out with Fortune. That's when it starts to get really sketchy.
Yeah, we call that Fortune prison, right, Dan? And there's a reason. Sometimes you're leaning in, right? In this situation, he's happy to lose, right? Build up that streak. Each successive Fortune loss is creating more and more potential for like a bigger and bigger cash out, which can turn, a last place game into a first place game. But the longer you go on that, while you are powering up your Fortune loss streak, you are also creating a dynamic where you're kind of razor's edge, right? 1 or 2 fights and you lose. So he's losing this fight again. He's killing a bunch of units. These are good losses, Dan. When you're playing Fortune, it's not about, you can try to win streak Fortune and build the extra gold. You can try to loss streak Fortune and build up the potential. But if you're loss streaking, you really, really want to try to kill as many units as possible. Kerm is achieving that goal, right? He is 88 HP. He's a full 16 clear of last place, and he's actually in a pretty good shape to start building up this loss streak.
Right. Look at the contrast between him and Ramblin', for example. Ramblin', from the very beginning of stage 2, looked like he was committed to just losing every single round in order to build up his economy and say, hey, I'm going to play a little bit more of that, Korean style where I'm just like committed to trying to come back from a 20, even 30 health deficit from 7th and 8th place. And, that's a strategy that we've seen work. It's also a strategy that's very capable of going 8th place. And we've seen a lot of that kind of dichotomy, even with players in North America. Yesterday, Spencer was a little bit of that, like a 1st or 8th. I believe he got 2 8s and 2 1sts. So, that kind of dynamic is a nice edge, and I'm scared a little bit for Ramblin', but I'm excited to catch up with him later and see if he can pick it up, as we do see Kerm get his first cash out with Fortune. Ooh, I wanted to see what he get, but it's probably going to be somewhere around the range of like maybe an item or 2 or Nico's help.
Yeah, only 2 loss streaks, so not a huge payday or anything, but definitely a boost to his economy. He'll continue to scale as we go over to the Jirachi's board. This is the first time we've looked at their board, and they are a really interesting player, one of the open qualifier players, but one who has been consistently high on the ladder throughout the set. Very excited to see them here and playing well.
Yeah, the Jirachi started off really great, coming in hot with the 1st place, then followed immediately with an 8th place. And then, was able to weather the storm and make sure that they qualified going into day number 2. Finds a Kale to join the Talon. It's a 4-cost party here before stage 3-1 even begins. Wow. So in this case, we've seen actually the Jirachi start off with a Talon victory on day number 1. And Talon seems to be one of these niche builds that people whip out every now and then, and it seems to be prevalent a little bit on Tournament Ladder. What's your thoughts on having carry talent be one of your compositions going into a tournament like this?
I think it's important to be open to all things, right? I mean, the more things you're open to, the more outs you have, right? We're talking about Valet earlier, who's playing to very few outs. If you're not open to Talon, then you're missing one of your outs, and sometimes you're just going to be high-rolling Talon. That being said, I think the power level of Talon is clearly below some of the other 4-cost carries. The Jirachi's win on Talon was actually the only win on Talon all of yesterday. Not a comp we saw a lot of, and not a comp we saw perform particularly well. KO, on the other hand, also only had one win, but was played in much higher volume. A lot of top 4s on this composition, and had a 50% top 4 rate, despite being played so much, which means it's sometimes getting played from behind. We're swapping over to Ramblin's board. As we talked about, he open forwarded early. Now is the big inflection point. This is when he has to figure out where he's going from here. He gets offered this Annie Chosen, Dan. Are we passing? Or we taking?
It's tricky because he already has the pieces to make mages great. He's got 2 items, which many people consider to be core to Aurelion Soul. You want to give big burst potential. You want to keep Aurelion Soul alive with the Guardian Angel. The last missing piece for what many consider to be the best in slot items would be a Hextech Gunblade, so Aurelion Soul can heal itself. And so I'm down. I'm down, especially because he also has Annie's on the bench ready to go and can scale up. And we've seen mages have success. Mages might be the most underplayed composition from day number 1 relative to its power strength. And the nice thing about it is that there's a lot of different ways that you can go into it. You can totally play straight up mages, try to have Aurelion Soul be your carry, splash in Dragon Soul or Elderwood accordingly. Or we've also seen some people re-roll mages and try to go Annie 3, Lulu 3. Heck, we even saw Twisted Fate go to 3-star with Brand being 3-star. So there's a lot of interesting paths that we can go with, and I'm actually just going to throw it back to you. We say this pretty regularly, but since Bryce is still kind of new to a lot of the TFT audiences as a caster, he is the self-proclaimed best mages player in North America. So give me the download. What do you think of mages right now?
Yeah, you laid it all out there already for me, Dan. I mean, there's just so much flexibility to how you play this composition, multiple possible carries. There are reroll variants where you're rerolling for 1 cost. There are reroll variants where you're rolling for 2 or 3 costs. There are, just to kind of play a generic mages board, which can go up to 7 mages, where you're just playing kind of all of the mages, or you can be playing 3 or 5 mages with Aurelion Soul carry. All of which, like you're saying, I think it's underplayed. I think this comp is quite powerful, and its performance statistically yesterday was far better than its play rate would indicate. Right, you would expect a composition that's doing well to see really, really high play rates, and that's not the case on mages. There's also a reality here, which is if you're Ramblin playing this open fort style, he's already at 56 HP, Dan. Right, he is way down there in HP. He can't afford to kind of keep fishing. You have to take the first out that's given to you when you're playing this type of style. And from his spot, mages are a very clear out, right? I mean, he's clearly slammed in AP tree direction with the Jeweled Gauntlet. And so he's going to play Nico. He's going to play, he could theoretically play Kale, though it's tough to get there when you're rolling down at 6. And he's going to play mages as another possible out, right? So when you're in that spot, you get offered a good chosen for the items you already have slammed. You've got to take it and roll with it.
Yeah, I like it. And there's also a Nico's help box on the bench that the graphic is slightly covering, which also adds to the ability to roll a little bit more on 7 than he would like to in order to perhaps get an early 2-star Aurelion Soul. As we take a look at the Lucky Lantern, which is crashing in 3-5, finds a bow, a loaded die, and the magnetic remover. Which is interesting given that, we know how good Slayers are, and now there might be a bigger case for everybody in the lobby to pursue, some kind of Chaos Slayers composition with everyone getting that extra bow and the loaded dice as we switch over to Kurum X and check in with him again.
Yeah, we swap back to Kurum X's position. He is in very powerful position. It does look like he got at least 1 item from Fortune, and it was a good item, right? The problem he had earlier with a Sunfire and a blue buff is it wasn't really giving him clear direction. He didn't really have good carry items. But now he has Last Whisper, he has Rune's Hurricane, he has an extra sword, which he'll want to become either a Deathblade or a Guardian Angel. So he has a clear direction toward the Slayer tree. These items can go on Olaf, they can go on Tryndamere, they can go on Samira. It's part of the beauty of that tree. And in addition to all of that, Dan, he has a Callista Chosen, which is one of the very best mid-game item holders for these types of AD items. Callista will use that Runaan's Hurricane to attack multiple units as everyone else will, but it's capable of building up the Rin stack. So you will see Callista just snowball fights like crazy with these items. Very, very strong unit in stage 3.
Totally. And, it's one of these things where because Kurum has the good foundation leading up to it, he might be able to skip level 7 in terms of not having to roll down and save his gold and try to go to 8 with, a lot of economy behind him and not bleed out too much HP. It's a little bit difficult to say because we have to at least scout the rest of the lobby, as we do see that Soulless is also, playing this Last Whisper Runaan's Hurricane core strategy, also slamming that Morello's, just a generically good item that scales way better than Sunfire Cape currently. And, surprising that Tristana is one of the best holders of it. It wasn't something that I thought about initially when I saw Tristana, making a little bit of that comeback into set 4.5. But she is a great user of it. So a little tip for anybody who's trying to find good item holders for their early game.
Yeah, it's a great call out. The Morellos is the fight difference here as we see Soulless win streaking heading into Wolves, right? You look at this board and it doesn't look like it's significantly better, right? It's a 1 cost chosen into a 3 cost chosen. We're talking on selling the Callistus, talking about how powerful this mid-game unit is, and it was absolutely a Morello difference with the 4 sharpshooter buff. When Tristana ults, she is applying that Morello essentially across the entire team, almost from the very beginning of the fight, Dan. So such a good holder of an item that has an enormous amount of power in the meta. He can take that and put that Morello, if he were to transition into like a keeper composition on Kennen, obviously, but Sejuani, an excellent holder of the item. You just slap it in the front line, ults early, and does its thing.
Yeah, Kurum finds another BF sword, has the ability to make Deathblade to go along with the Runaan's Hurricane as well as the Last Whisper. That's just the ultimate offensive glass cannon build that you can make, and you don't even have to put it all on the same carry either, right? You can spread it out, have Olaf hold the Runaan's Hurricane and Deathblade, for example, and put a defensive item on him, have Samira instead hold the Last Whisper or Tryndamere, or mix and match accordingly. And that's what partially makes, in my opinion, Slayers such an interesting tree to play, because you have so many viable ways to build and have your carries be itemized.
Yeah, absolutely. And Glass Cannon is the right description, right? When you build the Deathblade with these other items, you kind of have your carry items done. The problem being, there's nothing defensive about the Deathblade Runaan's Last Whisper build. It will blow things up, but if it starts to take any damage, you have real issues. So Kurum electing not to slam the Deathblade. I do agree with this. It's a somewhat greedy play, but I think the Guardian Angel is just so powerful. It's part of the problem with Slayers is functionally all the carries are melee, right? I mean, your 4-cost carries definitely are, and Olaf and Tryndamere, and your legendary carrier, Samira, is basically a melee carry, right? She has 420 range. It's 2 hexes of range, right? So it's no longer possible to kind of put a Samira in the backline and let it do its thing. You flip over to Valet's board, who is living in the Slayer tree with another really powerful opening for it, by the way. We saw him get offered that Cultist TF. He winds up getting the 6 Cultists online very early, and while he's not full streaking, he's at 90 HP in excellent shape. I'm also not surprised that we're looking at a Declaw, right, instead of the Chalice Power we were talking about earlier. When you want to play Slayers, there's just not value in that Chalice, so this is a clear indication from Valet that he is sticking to the game plan that worked for him yesterday. He's going to play as much Slayers as he possibly can, and his items reflect that.
Yeah, very much so, and also has the possibly best mid-game composition that Mort was talking about yesterday, which is 6 Cultists, and also a Last Whisper, right, to kind of go along with it. It feels like everybody in this lobby that isn't playing Kaels or mages of some kind is going to be building Last Whispers, and for good reason. Just look at how many Vanguards you see, a 2-star and at the front. So it's going to be really important in this game for your damage carry to have it. That being said, he's going up against Kivix, who has the Keepers Online chosen Kennen with a 2-star Xayah and some really good items. Guardian Angel, Last Whisper, and Hand of Justice. That's pretty much as good as it gets for this composition. And yesterday, we saw some really big underperformance from Keepers, Bryce. But that is a really good start for Kivix to make this comeback and charge the top 4.
Yeah, absolutely. Keepers is a composition that I was surprised when we broke down the data at how poorly it performed yesterday, right? It had one of the lowest top 4 rates of all the comps. It did have a high win rate, right? It had like a 25% win rate. So definitely capable of getting to a high power level and winning lobbies. I think there's just some mistakes, to be quite blunt with you, about how the keeper comp is being played. I think people don't really understand the win conditions of the composition very well. It's a comp that people are kind of bailing out and into when they're low rolling early, and so they're rolling on 7 and they think they've got the items for it and they go for it. But it's very hard to get a Kinnan 3 when you're playing from behind unless you crazy high roll. And so I think that in many ways the keeper comp is actually quite good from ahead and snowballing leads. I'm not saying you can't play it from behind, but I think people were kind of trapping themselves into bad spots, and particularly when it's a Slayers-based meta. I mean, this is a composition that was in many ways designed to counter the Slayers, because you get so much power out of having this big clump that CCs and deals damage to the melee carries in Tryndamere and Olaf. As we swap over to Solus's board, Solus is playing the Slayer composition we're talking about. He is transitioning. He buys a frontline Chosen. This Vanguard Aatrox, very powerful. He just needs to find a way to get a 2-star carry online. He goes up against Jirachi's board. Jirachi is sticking with that Talon. It looks like hard committed to the Talon, a Talon pair. So we have 2 1-star 4-cost carries duking it out, Dan.
Yeah, and you can see that the most important thing for Solus was just getting the items onto the Olaf. Doesn't even place the Morello Nomicon because it's not going to be relevant right now. But what's important is getting that Olaf activated. Jirachi seems to be leaning once more towards Talon, stuck on Talon 1, which is a sight all too familiar for anyone who's played Talon before. It seems like Talon 1 is just your destiny unless you somehow you either find Talon 2 way too early, like in stage 3, it feels like, or you just never find Talon 2. That's just been my experience playing that comp, even as recently as yesterday.
Yeah, that's my experience as well. Talon's one of those units that when you're looking for it, you can never find it, but when you're not looking for it, it feels like the game just gives you 100 Talons. I just picture like Mortdog sitting in an evil lair somewhere just going, ha 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 ha, enjoy your Talons, Slayer player, and then Jirachi will roll down 100 gold and not find a Talon. We get into this board. It is the keeper board again. This is a very well itemized Xayah, as you pointed out, and this is exactly what we were talking about. The keeper composition tends to do very well into the Olaf because Olaf gets CC'd by the cannon before it ults, and then most of the kind of front line that's theoretically stalling and protecting for Olaf goes away. Xayah is able to isolate and then ultimately kill the Olaf. So that's how that matchup goes a lot of the time. I have a feeling keepers are making a comeback today, Dan. I think that the poor performance yesterday is a weird outlier. I think keepers are going to do very well, particularly with how popular Slayers were.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree, especially as the quality of the field, starts to, or rather the quantity of the field starts to boil down to just the elite few that's able to remain. Quite frankly, yesterday, we also saw a lot of mistakes being made with keepers. And so that's going to naturally drag down the win rate if more people are trying it but are less experienced with it. And as a result, show some glaring weaknesses of the composition that, perhaps they weren't thinking about. What was that? Solus just dropped 3 Katarinas over the course of 2 orbs. Did I just see that correctly?
Yeah, I think you did see that correctly. And you know what? It's funny because he plays a lot of Katarina, right? He hasn't played it in the tournament yet. As he hits the Olaf too, that is a big spike for him. Static Shiv, not a particularly good item in this composition, but neither is the Ludin, so he's just trying to figure out kind of how to maximize the value of the items he has left. Solus is an interesting spot here, Dan. He's got 76 HP. So very healthy at this stage of the game. He already has a Chosen. He already has his carry. And while he has a bunch of 1-star units on his board and a bunch of potential unit replacements, I mean, these are definitely not the units he ultimately wants. He's playing a Tristana, for example. He's playing a Darius as well. He elects to stop rolling. He's playing Valet, who has a Samira 2, ?
Yeah, Samira 2 that's not really being challenged as Aatrox tries to pull into Samira, but it's way too late. And at this point, Solus is hoping to kill as many units as possible before that Samira wakes up. Wait! The Samira was not able to get away upon resurrection, and Solus, with that big lifesteal from the Slayer's attribute, is able to get back into it. Wow, that's not a fight reversal that I was expecting. But Solus looks like he's in good position. Taking a look at the rest of the lobby as well, though, there's some players that are also in danger of bottoming out. Burtosaurus at 7 HP, Ramblin under 20 points as well, and Kerm not far behind.
Yeah, and we reverse jinxed Jirachi, who has now successfully found their Talon 2 and Morgana 2, so very good position. Unfortunately, does not have the Morellonomicon dam, which I view as kind of mission critical to this composition. We call this composition Talon, but in many ways, Morgana is the true carry, and she just doesn't quite have the same impact without a Morello.
Yeah, not quite the same amount of impact. You still have a little bit of that burn in the form of Swain, but yeah, there's some bigger problems, which is how do you actually deal with these keepers if a lot of your units are basically at melee range, making them very susceptible to Kennen. There's no Guardian Angel on Kivix's Kennen, but that's totally okay because Kennen's at 3-star, having that big keeper buff, and even Dragon Claws to keep it alive. And you can see that we're identifying that Kivix might be the player that can start to streak in the top 4, and that's exactly what's happened, as they are the only people right now, or rather player, that's streaking in the lobby.
Yeah, and we're seeing Jirachi trying to figure out, right, in a tough spot, looking at the lobby complexion, just lost to the person who was in 5th place when kind of middling HP, and then the top of the lobby, Nubao, Valet, and Solus, all so healthy. It's hard to envision Jirachi coming back and top 4 from this position. So they're just trying to figure out how to minimize the damage. And we haven't gotten a chance to talk about this yet, but not every game of TFT is destined to be a 1st place, contrary to what many of our ladder grinders might think. Some of the best skill expression in this game is figuring out how to turn an 8th into a 7th, a 7th into a 6th, right? It's not even always about top 4ing, but this is a really bad fight for the Jirachi. It looks fatal, question mark? Ooh, 2 HP.
Super close. Staying alive. We're living. Bert looks like to be out, so at least it's not in 8th place. But yeah, you've identified one of the big problems. Yeah, Bertosaurus had been doing pretty well going into the weekend, as well as even yesterday, getting 2 first places and 3 top 4s on top of that. But yeah, let's take a look at what is happening around, as Jirachi does end up picking up what looks like to be the Swain, trying to increase the chance of hitting Swain 2. Maybe at worst just swapping it in and getting that Shroud. But when we're looking at the lobby complexion, it just seems so attack damage heavy at the moment that I'm just not really feeling like Talon is right here, is well positioned in this lobby. Talon feels better when you're trying to snipe these very fragile carries that are in the back. Not necessarily the Olafs and the Tryndamirs that are smacking your front line and back line from the front. So I am curious to see if Jirachi can pull this out.
Yeah, tough spot, a composition that's not very good in the lobby, like you said. The only kind of backline carry we saw was the KO. The KO board obviously just destroyed Jirachi's board. Just couldn't get access to the KO, right? It's got a QSS in the back. It's just wailing away safely with that RFC. There's nothing that can really CC it because of the QSS, and so just able to kind of freely DPS and just wipe the board. There's not a lot of tankiness here from the Jirachi, right? A lot of 1-stars on the board. Pike 1, Swain 1, Fiora 1 now after swapping the Redemption. Heading into Kermex's board, very, very high likelihood one of these players is going to die, Dan.
Yeah, Kerm has a chosen Tryndamere with some pretty good items as well, and this looks like it is the end of the road for Jirachi, as they are out in 7th place. Ramblin stays alive, as he saw Kerm be able to do it at, 10 HP. So the top 4 looks very likely to include Solos, Nubao, and Valet, but with Kivix still streaking, can Kerm and Ramblin crack the top 4? That's pretty much the question at this point, as we see Valet rolling down at 9, sees a chosen Mystic Zillion, which is extremely powerful, and thinking about selling stuff to get that.
Yeah, I would say this is actually the best chosen in the game, Dan. The mana reduction on Zillion is so insane. There's just so much power on this unit. And he is in a position where that's exactly what he needs, right? Teching and Mystics to deal with the limited amount of magic damage in the lobby. He already has this insane Samira 2 at level 8 chosen, carry, so it's not like he needs to look for a damage dealer. As last time Solus was able to get the better of Valet. Not this time. A lot of damage heading Solus' way.
Yep, and that's some big damage dealt to Solus, but still pretty clear for the top 3. Nubel ends up getting that win. Kerm takes the loss, but still stays alive, as this lobby is starting to really get down to who can sneak into top 4 and who cannot. Kivix takes the first loss in quite some time, finally having their streak ended where I'm looking at Valet's board, I'm looking at Newbow, and just thinking, are these players just going to systematically eliminate every player that they run into at this point? Because it didn't seem like Solus was able to come anywhere close to beating Valet, and Valet just got a lot stronger with S22.
Yeah, Solus, in fairness, had not gone to level 9 yet. So we saw him at 50 gold, level 8. It's unclear how much gold he had, but I think it's safe to assume he's going level 9 either this coming turn on 6-1 or on 6-2. So certainly a lot of perspective powers. We do see him go to level 9. So, you know, in contrast, Valet just needs 2 stars from unit. Solus finds the chosen sharpshooter Samira, Dan, and he still has the magnetic remover. He saved it the entire game. He moves those items off of Olaf. He says, Olaf is a good carry. Samira chosen with 4 sharps. This is a great carry, Dan. He heard you talking about his board. He said, I got a little bit left in me.
Yeah, and, you know, with the sharpshooter, it is actually super powerful. I think people focus on the Slayer aspect of Samira, but make no mistake, that sharpshooter is just as deadly as she is going to get powered up. She has the damage variant of the Hand of Justice, but there's just so much momentum going up against Solus here as Kurum, with that 2-star Yone fully itemized, as well as a Tryndamere and the Olaf. There's 3 big threats in Kurum's side of the board, and he is staying alive, trying to see if he can crush his way into the top 4. And if Ramblin goes down, he's at least got 5th locked up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
and
no,
you know
Ramblin wins. This is coming down to the wire here.
It's such a tight lobby, Dan, and you know what? Let's all go to school on Solus's LP here, if you will, because he made a huge mistake. He kind of generically positions this Samira in the back line, but as you saw, he had to walk up not 1 but 2 hexes in order to start auto-attacking. At the end of the game, when there's so much power on the board, fights are incredibly close, and they're incredibly fast, and you just cannot afford to have your main damage dealer waiting this long to do damage, as we will watch. So he does move it up 1 row. If there's a unit directly in front of him, he'll have to walk up 1 and auto attack. Otherwise, he's gonna have to walk a couple hexes again before it does anything. Dan, it's a big deal.
Yeah, and you know this. Oh my goodness, the damage from Aurelion Sol, instant nuking, and somehow a little bit of a moonwalk coming out from Samira, trying to get into the mix. Aurelion Sol trying to end the life before it's able to get the final cast off, and Ramblin with another victory. Valet takes another loss. And Kurum finally falls at 1 HP, but top 4 is not guaranteed for anybody right now. It looks very scary. I guess it is likely that some of these 10 health players are finally going to face each other, which means that they will be eliminated. And so that extra HP lead for Valet and Neubauer is really going to come in handy to book that top 4. But how the rest of this game is going to pan out, I don't feel like I can predict it, because it just seems like it is completely too close to call at this point.
Yeah, it definitely is. We see Ramblin worried about a Zephyr, so he moves a kind of meaningless Twisted Fate into the front line. He's going up against Valet's board. Valet, very strong. We haven't seen this matchup yet. You know, Ramblin's power level is insanely high, Dan. He has the set 2 Eternal Winter. He's got an Annie 3, and then he's got, obviously, this 7 Mage Aesol, just the leading units in the backs. The Samir does get into the middle, still hasn't had his GA popped, I don't believe, Dan, so it's going to be coming back to life. The Annie is dead. Set should be ulting and killing the Samira, Dan. It just needs to get some damage onto it. Annie never dies. Solus out in 5th place. If you are Solus, you are mauling right now, Dan. I can't believe that board was a fit.
Yeah, that board with Samira 2 and all of that power packed into that damage-based composition, getting a 5th place, that's outrageous to me. But, you know, at the same time, looking at everyone else's board, they look really strong. You're seeing, for example, the tech that we identified yesterday. I believe it was Ramblin, who really believes in the Dragon Soul Spatula Annie. That seems to be one of the trademarks of him playing the Mage's composition. And that is something that he's been doing a lot on the leaderboard. While everyone else is playing Kale and Slayer, you know, trying to grab their recurve bows and swords, Ramblin's been grabbing the tears and the rods primarily as his game plan. And once more, able to find some success with it. I do love some of the positioning nuances as well. You know, I think a lot of people get obsessed with cornering Aurelion Sol. And look at him trying to go for a back end corner position to try and dodge some of the opponent's board here, and he does end up positioning directly in front of the cannon for the keepers from Kivix, which might end up being something that works out because he can stall out this keeper composition while keeping Aurelion Sol safe from a distance. And now Aurelion Sol finally has built up the mana to cast, trying to get the big damage out, but interrupted mid-second cast, which is a huge deal for that overload. And this is the point where we have to see Annie 3's value. She is just never dying, staying alive to the very bitter end. And that's another victory for Ramblin', another elimination, and that's a top 3 for our Mages player.
Yeah, it's a top 3, really, really well played overall, where he creates this maximum amount of separation from his primary carry, Aurelion Sol, over to the keeper clump right on the far right side. I also love the Death's Defiance on Annie because it's just like the perfect symbol for this unit. This unit can't die, Dan. With 7 mages, she is building up such an incredible shield. She has the Gargoyle Stone Plate, and she's constantly taking aggro from so many units. I haven't seen anyone kill this unit yet.
It just seems impossible, right? There's so much resistances and Death's Defiance, but keep in mind, Set also being like the big cleanup, never really being needed, but also just being there in case the fight requires it, as Valet is going to be one of these big bosses for Ramblin' to clear. Aurelion Sol looks like he's going to get the cast on Wake Up, but the Lee Sin with the kick. And now Set trying to go in before he gets kicked out, but with that big explosion is going to die, and the construct is just nowhere near. Valet is going to be able to pick up exactly